we practice that self-compassion, we're also learning what our needs are, why we're feeling this way, what's happening inside, giving us more empathy to understand why are other people making mistakes or doing things that hurt us. How do we see what's behind that? Offer compassion. And so it's a feedback loop. It's a stance that we take inside toward our relationship with life, with all of life.
Today, I am so happy to welcome Shannon Gorres. Let me tell you a little bit more about her. So Shannon Gorres, MDiv MA, is a spiritual director, board-certified chaplain, and nature therapy guide on Konza Lands, Kansas, USA. Along with her spouse and child, she shares sacred life with 20 acres of plants and animals. Her religious roots are Catholic, Protestant, yogic, Buddhist, Sufi, and poetry. She was first ordained by the United Church of Christ and is now an ordained Shirag in the Sufi Ruhaniyat International. She companions diverse people through pain and disconnection into an integrative and loving relationship with themselves and the divine. She engages embodied spiritual practices, nervous system science, trauma healing techniques, imaginal and nature elements, and can be found at divinenaturetherapy.com, which we'll, of course, put in the description box and talk about a little bit at the end as well. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you.
So to start, you've spoken about how we can work with our knowing of the all, that capital A, all. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that, to the all, and to ways that we can work with it.
Yeah, a lot of us have various names for divinity. Sometimes I like divine love, unity, consciousness, the all-pervading interconnection. And the all with a capital A is one way that I'm referring to something that is beyond our individual selves and also includes something other than physical or just material reality, that there's energy that is traveling through, within, and amongst all of us, uniting us. And so you ask, what are the ways we can work with the all? Of course, awareness through our thoughts, our cognition. Perhaps more exciting in today's world is a return to embodiment, knowing that through the sensations that we feel in our flesh and bones, we are receiving information, storing information, creating connection, and sending that back out. That's happening without conscious thought at times. And that we can unify those together as well. We can work with our bodies, our nervous systems, our gut brain, the heart brain. Scientists continue to look deeper into these levels of knowing ourselves and knowing outside of ourselves. So I really cherish traditional methods like prayer and song and contemplation. And through them, of course, we can get to the not knowing of the all, the unknowing, peeling back the layers to find more mystery, to find that there's something still deeper yet, still quieter yet, still more undescribable, and something that's beyond palpation, perhaps. So there's the knowing, and then there's the not knowing of the all that we can experience through a whole bunch of different wonderful methods.
Yeah, I'm wondering, so you mentioned the body specifically. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about that. I know about the body is, in several spiritual lineages and traditions, a very important part. In others, maybe less so, or at least less obviously so in current times. Could you say a little bit more about the body and its important role in the spiritual journey for people?
Absolutely. And I think, as you mentioned, it's just whether or not we're naming it in its role. It's always there, right? It's always with us, but it's how connected we are and intentionally involving we are with the body. So, you think of a tradition like yoga that sees the body as having chakras, these energy sources and centers in the body that we can work with to heal ourselves, work with to shift, move energy. And we do specific shapes and poses in our body to work with those. And comparison, somebody might think about standard evangelical Protestant Christianity and think, oh, it's not as bodyful. We're not Catholics. We're not kneeling, or we're not prostrating on the ground. And yet there may be clapping. There may be different forms of body reference that are happening. And in any religious tradition, we can look at what is the body doing. Stillness is one way that we let the monkey mind that's always chattering calm down through meditative practices, and let be raked away some of those thoughts that are extraneous and get to the nugget or a core of something that our heart really wants to connect with. And then a completely opposite sense, ecstatic prayer in churches or through the Five Rhythms Dance method by Gabrielle Roth lead us to a different form of knowing the all or divinity through intense body movement that also, in a certain level, lets the thinking mind calm down. So you have these two ends of the spectrum. We could sit still in a 10-hour long meditation, or we can be dancing what looks like chaotically, but in a free flow movement of the spirit, and get to that same root of something that is unifying body and mind, and then also beyond that chatter that we have as human animals.
Yeah, I love so much that you mentioned noticing, like the clapping, for example. There's a video I haven't posted yet that's about practices we're not counting as practice, just, one that I did myself. Like, what are we counting as practice? And I think, it's really easy to not realize, like you said, the body is here. We are doing things with it. So you can someone can even just start with noticing what they're already doing, which is interesting. It also reminds me, in a totally different context where I do some relationship work, I was making the statement that co-regulation, and sometimes people being concerned about it because they think, oh, it's codependency, which it isn't really, but we're actually already doing it. So we're sort of either doing it well and sort of intentionally, or not, or not. But it's not like we're not. And that reminds me of the heart math stuff that you brought up too. So really important, I think, to realize that a lot of this is already happening. So it's an exploration, maybe sometimes, of something new, but it might be an exploration of what's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what are my hands doing when I'm praying? Or am I wringing them? Are they calm and relaxed? Am I holding some formal prayer posture? Am I reaching up because there's some connection of lifting energy? Am I sobbing on the ground with a lot of contact between my skin and the earth and gravity that's supporting and holding me? Just noticing what my style is, what my body needs, and being willing to experiment with whatever might be happening in your practice already could be powerful awareness.
Yeah. And then I'm wondering, I guess, getting a little more into the connective piece with others. There's, of course, we'll maybe get into the natural world in a minute. And so other aspects of others, I'm thinking of other humans in this case. Could you speak a little more about that, and how you see the role of this kind of noticing, of embodiments? I know I've experienced one particular practice that you did where it was very much about noticing, like, for example, something like bias. Like, there's things that our body can tell us that we don't necessarily, our mind might be glossing over or skipping, but our body has the wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely. When we have a practice of noticing the energy in our body, if it feels flowing or stuck, noticing our shape, our posture, our facial expressions, whatever they may be. And like I gave you the example with the hands, whenever we build that awareness of what's happening in our body, we get more information about what we're drawn to naturally, what we're repulsed by naturally, and what else is there for opportunity. You mentioned bias, and so in that workshop, I was talking about how there's so much focus on verbal aggression, including microaggression, where we don't want to be ableist or say things that are racist or sexist, etc. And in microaggressions, we're saying things that we don't quite know are also offensive, or our subconscious maybe coming out there with some previous indoctrination in judgmental thought. And so we're looking always at the words that are coming out from the cognition, whether it's conscious or subconscious cognition. But our body's also speaking at the same time. And so if we notice that we're leaning in and we're really giving somebody our full attention, or that we start to become distracted when a specific person is talking, or we suddenly have to chew on our fingernail, we start to get a clue about what our internal relationship is to them that our conscious might not be aware of. And, as I talk about the divinity is within all in my worldview. I'm a panentheist. I believe that there is something holy. Speaking of the holiness connection, there is something holy in each part of the whole, the WHOLE, that if we really revered each part of humanity and beyond the human world as part of the divine, then we could be tuning our bodies the way that we orient and engage as if we are in a bow, a prostration, and honoring to each and every person and object that we meet. So,
Yeah. So that's starting to get a little bit into what I was saying about, the non-human worlds and nature. I'm wondering about your thoughts about, well, there's a lot of broad questions here. You can go any direction you want. You can take it really broad if you like to. Or I know you also do, forest bathing practices with people, that kind of thing. So I'm curious, anything from the really big role of nature and how that interacts and how you see that, to practices.
mm-hmm. For many of us in the 21st century, in the United States, our lives have become so hectic and busy that our relationship with nature has become so minimized. And throughout 99.99% of human history, we have been living deeply, deeply interwoven days with nature. Everything that we do and touch and smell and breathe and work with is in nature. So one of the things I do is just welcome people back to a mindfulness and body fullness in nature, because we need to reorient ourselves for all the health reasons. There's so much research out there about how being around nature helps us psychologically, physiologically, etc. But it's more than that. It's really about our interdependence and how we are here on the earth living reciprocal lives of mutuality. What I do to a plant, I'm doing to myself, just like what we do to another human, we may be doing to ourselves once we come to see that we are nothing else but one piece of a giant pie that gets baked together, right? So nature I'm often using to help people heal. When I work with folks in counseling, we're involving nature so that we can learn more about who we are as beings and how we belong within ourselves, within the committee of selves we have inside, but also within the external selves around us. And I see that as a way that we can also get back to nature, because as each human being heals and finds more of who they truly are, they're going to naturally be also wanting to take care of the planet and honor and respect all life forms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So interesting that it's yet another one of those sort of inner outer and mirroring relationships. It's making me think already about something I was going to talk about later, which is self-compassion, because, like you were saying, how we treat nature is how we treat ourselves, and then perhaps the reverse as well. How do you see self-compassion's role in any of the parts of the spiritual journey?
As you just said, the way that we treat others, human beings, and nature, and also how we treat ourselves is all aligned. And so when we learn self-compassion, which is bringing a loving kindness to ourselves, no matter what we're suffering, which can include judgment against ourselves or shame, fear, sadness, all those. Self-compassion is bringing mindfulness, awareness that we're experiencing those feelings or thoughts, negative thoughts against ourselves, and being kind to ourselves, saying, "Ooh, this is hard. Man, I'm feeling so embarrassed, or I feel not good enough." And bringing a soothing motion, caring touch, kind words on top of those harsh words. Self-compassion is not even trying to change the fact that we're having those, because the first step is acceptance, self-acceptance. I accept that I'm having these thoughts and feelings, even as uncomfortable as they are or as harsh as they seem, and then bringing some tenderness to them. And when we learn to be compassionate towards ourselves, the research shows that we also become more compassionate to others in our lives, because it's an attitude, it's a perspective of acceptance that all of humanity and the world beyond humanity isn't perfect, and that it's okay to make mistakes, and that we can be forgiving with intentions to change. Forgiveness is a whole nother big topic, but so when we practice that self-compassion, we're also learning what our needs are, why we're feeling this way, what's happening inside, giving us more empathy to understand, why are other people making mistakes or doing things that hurt us? How do we see what's behind that? Offer compassion. And so it's a feedback loop. It's a stance that we take inside toward our relationship with life, with all of life. How do I want to relate to life?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because I think it's easy perhaps to think, you don't want to navel gaze, or, you don't want to be selfish or something like that. But I think when you say it that way, really starting with ourselves is the the foundation of this much wider practice that does involve everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, we can see in different religious strands, not in particular religions, but in streams of each one, where things might get very hierarchical, dogmatic, legalistic, and judgmental if the supreme being is considered very powerful, but also judgmental and rule oriented, and we enter into a belief system like that, we may bring that view upon ourselves. Like, I am very harsh with myself if I don't measure up to perfection, and then I'm also demanding and expecting of others. We do have to have expectations of others, but expecting beyond a reasonable expectation. And so it all goes together: how we treat each other, our conception of the divine, how we treat animals, whether it's for food or for pets, or they're in the wild, whatever it is. Generally, a worldview is coherent. So as we bring compassion to a worldview, what would it be like for a supreme being such as God or divine love to be compassionate? What would it be like to embody that toward all beings on the planet? That change slowly occurs, as well as toward ourselves.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's really beautiful. The other thread I wanted to pick up from what you said earlier, when you were talking about just welcoming things, I mean, it was just reminding me of non-clinging in general, and what you resist persists, and all of those wise teachings. So it kind of has to be the way, but it can feel difficult. I wonder if you have any tips for, people trying to walk the path of actually welcoming themselves and feeling it, because maybe that sounds easy, but it isn't always easy to do that.
I particularly love the Self-Compassion Workbook by Kristen Neff. I think there's great prompts in there from the field of psychotherapy that are well researched, and they bring a lot of spiritual practices from the East that have become evidence-based practices, which means enough scientific research has been done to show that they help a majority of people. And a lot of the practices in that book I share with my clients There's the loving kindness meditation, practicing the way that we would love a friend or somebody in our family we love dearly, the way that we would love a stranger, somebody we don't know, and turning that love upon ourselves. It also uses a mind-body scan, looking for tension and bringing compassion to our area. There's lots of ways that we need a daily practice if we're going to change something that's very ingrained in us. So having something like a workbook or a practice group to consistently help us realign our thinking patterns, I think is one of the best tips I can give is get a structured or regular way that you can engage with material of compassion. I also love teaching nonviolent communication, or what's also called compassionate communication. And there's so much on the web, not just worksheets and workbooks if you're not the reading type, but there's a lot of great videos. If you just like watching how people can talk to themselves and talk to each other, if you're a visual audio learner, I just recommend finding a way that works for you to have frequent engagement with the words and sensations and practices of compassion and loving kindness, so you don't feel like you're struggling alone. Like, man, I'm just so critical to myself and I can't stop it. And then you're mad at yourself and you're criticizing yourself for being so critical. Right?
Yeah, ironically, that can
Right.
happen, right? You're trying to do the
Yeah,
self-compassion practice and you're like, oh, not
right.
doing
Yeah.
the
So
self-compassion practice right.
yeah, defining some external support of that. It doesn't have to all be you, taking the burden off your shoulders,
Yeah.
off that, again, that expectation that you have to be
Mhm.
a one-man show or solo successful person, right? That you can do this with community support.
Yeah, and so it was so important, that beginning piece that you said too, to understand that something is ingrained in us. And so it takes some time and practice. We can't just change overnight. And it's understandable that that's true. So I
Yeah.
know I used to, on my spiritual journey, like, the insight part can feel so big and it's really important. But then it doesn't always just magically change everything. Like, we still go back into our old patterns and we still have to work with ourselves. So that's kind of that piece of the holiness too. And I think why also that psychological piece, for example, in addition to the body, gets pulled in there. It's really all part of the same us.